Look, thanks for giving us an hour. We like the book. We like the style of it. It was
Sorry, so by the way, I've done 3 books. So which book are we talking about?
combo prospect.
Combo. Okay. Yep.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah. Actually, let's take a quick detour there, Tony. What are the other books?
This is the latest book,
Mhm.
TechPad Sales. So it's gone #1 in 5 categories on Amazon.
Super.
Um, this is published by the American Management Association and HarperCollins Leadership,
Okay.
and it was released in September last year. And it takes the concepts in combo prospecting and provides a lot of practical application.
Wow. Great. And you said there's another one too?
My first book is this one, The Joshua Principle.
Mhm.
So this is in its 10th printing. And I'm being facetious as I say this, but it makes grown men weep. I've had a lot of people tell me stories where they were reading the end of the book on a flight coming back to Australia or something, and they're bawling their eyes out, and the aircrew are saying, "Are you okay?" And so,
Well, flights are one of those unique environments where if you're dealing with anything a little emotional, it's going to get you.
yeah. So yeah, but
Well, we won't ask you to do a spoiler on the Joshua Principle, but rather just to encourage people to go pick up all 3 of those books and give them a read.
yeah, thank you. And the first book, The Joshua Principle, is about strategic enterprise selling, and
Okay.
it's written as a novel. So it's a story about a father and a son. They got a broken relationship. The father organizes a mentor for him, and you get to listen into the mentorship. And at the very end of the book, you discover that the mentor is really the father, because
Oh, wow.
it was correspondence based, and the father's dying.
Well,
Yeah.
well, good for you for stretching the genre. We have made it a practice in our business to consume something like about a sales book a week among the team.
Oh wow.
And to every chance we get, speak to the authors, because we always get so much more interesting texture
Yeah.
when we do that, which I think is what's going to happen over the next 50 minutes here.
Yeah.
But
So, okay.
I love the fact that in your first book you took an effort to sort of stretch the boundaries of this category, because actually that's something that I think is kind of missing and needed. It's a complex job,
It
sales, and
is.
it takes more than a series of to-do list tips and things like that to kind of
Yeah, it does.
coach and help people along the way.
Yeah. So Kevin, you feel free to take this conversation wherever you'd like to go. It's all good.
Okay. Well, the first thing I want to ask about is Tony Hughes. So there are some pretty interesting anecdotes in the book itself. Flying and landing a plane, and just a perfect storm of personal tragedy that happened to you in one window of your life, and then a lot of different posts and positions that you've personally taken, Hummingbird and Sugar CRM and so on. I think all of those go into why an author has sort of the authority or the gravity to write something like you write. So I think it's maybe just worth me saying, tell us a little bit more about Tony Hughes, and if I can beg you for it, I'd like to hear more specifically about flying. But yeah, maybe just give us a couple of words about Tony Hughes.
Yeah, so I'm actually about to turn 60, so I'm getting old. I'd like to think that I've got a lot of wisdom and still have some energy, as opposed to I'm tired and worn out and no longer relevant. And my latest book, is written in an area that's highly relevant today. How is technology changing everything? Because we're in the 4th industrial revolution. We're very much in a digital first world. The way we deliver employee and customer experience is really the new battleground of whether you're going to win and sustain market share.
Mm.
So there's a lot of challenges for everybody, and all selling in the last 2 years became inside sales. So for a lot of those field sellers that were relying on the strength of relationship and getting in front of people, have really had to figure out how to go to the next level. And that happens probably at 2 dimensions. One is I need to up the level of value that I provide in the interactions with a customer.
Mm.
And the other piece I'll talk about in the latest book, TechPad Sales, is we all need to become masterfully good at wrangling our own tech stack. So we need to work out how do we use the technology to become more effective?
Mm.
Because unless you become a little cyborg where you're leveraging technology incredibly well and then focusing your time and energy into the truly human things that make a difference for clients. So things around great storytelling, being able to jointly create a vision for a brighter future with the client, helping them navigate the politics, secure consensus, create their business case. These are things that tech won't do. But what we need to use technology for is to monitor for trigger events in the marketplace that indicate a propensity to buy or where there's a really good, strong fit. So I sort of digress. I'll maybe back up a little. So I got started in sales when I was 25. I was actually working in the USA. I had my own company in the States. I started in business myself when I was young. I got a phone call on my 25th birthday from my stepfather to let me know that my mum had liver cancer. So we came home, we nursed her at home. She died 7 weeks later. I won't go into all of the gory details, but, often we think, surely nothing else can go wrong, or bad things come in threes. I had about 7 or 8 things all within a 90-day period.
Yeah.
It was fairly catastrophic. I decided I needed to stay in Sydney, stay in Australia. And one of the limitations I was facing was that when we'd sold the Australian business, I had a do not compete for 12 years because we were getting royalties. So my big lesson in America that I learned when I was there was that if you can't personally sell, you're nowhere as an entrepreneur or a business leader. So I did not know what I wanted to do next in business, but I thought I sure as hell need to go learn how to sell. And I got a job in the radio paging industry in the very early days of radio paging. They made a big bet in hiring me. I had no sales experience. A couple of the guys in the company, I discovered this about 4 months later, had a bet at the pub on my first night at the pub on a Friday night, thinking how long it was before I either resigned or got fired. But I became the number 1 person in the company, about 110 reps, and the number 1 person in the industry. The records I said have never been broken. I managed to sell, for example, to IBM against Telstra, who was the incumbent, managed to sell to IBM at 70% higher prices than they were paying Telstra. And there's still a client today, if you can believe this, many decades later. There's still actually a role for radio paging, believe it or not. So, and I then went into management in the telco industry, and I got frustrated. And I'm sure, Kevin, you can relate to this. I got frustrated that as a manager, you get paid at the average, and the reward for all the hard work and success is just more problems to deal with. And I thought, wow, I think I'd rather go be a rep in an industry that pays more and have a better lifestyle. So then I went into IT hardware. And then from that industry, I ended up getting into management in that industry and had the same frustrations. And then I went and became a rep in the software industry and then ended up running software companies in Asia Pacific. So along that journey was, and I've been a ferocious reader and student. Seeking to learn how to sell because it's a abstract, incredibly tough profession.
You have a bookshelf behind you, and I can tell the difference between a fake bookshelf and a real one.
That's real.
That's a real bookshelf. Yeah. And there's a beautiful passage, Tony, in the book, which I will already slice out and share with a handful of our customers, where you just talk about reading and the importance of reading. And it's right at the opening shot. And your style as a writer is a little bit grenade throwing. I don't think you'll be offended by me saying that. I think you admit it yourself. But the message effectively is, if you're not prepared to become a serious student of the craft, then change craft immediately, because you cannot win at a serious level if you won't be a student. And in particular, a reader. That's something you go after quite specifically. Even though it's most beautifully written in that opening, we'll call it a salvo, in that opening salvo, maybe can you just kind of give a message to sales folks? I'm particularly thinking about folks who are kind of early in the career, early innings, and they might have not cottoned onto this idea yet.
The reality for all of us is that we work in a profession, and yet so many people in this profession don't act professionally. So I just want to give you a couple of examples. Imagine you're about to board a flight and you're walking down the aero bridge. You come to the threshold of the aircraft, and the air crew member is asking to see your boarding pass. And as she's looking at your boarding pass, you glance to your left and you have a look into the cockpit, and you overhear the pilot and co-pilot speaking, and the co-pilot says, "Man, I love flying, but I'm just not into filling in all the paperwork," and the pilot says, "Yeah, look, I get you. I love flying, but I'm just not into all the tech," right? Like, if you overheard those kinds of things, you would turn around and walk away, right?
Yeah.
Imagine if you went to your doctor and your doctor saw you, diagnosed you, wrote out a prescription and said, "Great, thank you." And you said, "Well, hang on, aren't you going to update the patient record system?" Well, do you want me to diagnose you and give you a script, or do you want me to be filling in my patient CRM? Like, we would just go, that is such an inane thing to say. You're a professional. I expect you to do both. You have to do both. And it just amazes me how many sellers don't understand how to use their basic tools of trade, whether it's their CRM, their sales intelligence tools. Maybe they're in something like LinkedIn Sales Navigator. That's very expensive. Their employer provides it, but they don't know how to do the basic saved Boolean searches and use it to monitor trigger events and things like that. Or a common thing I hear is they say, "Oh, look, I'm not really into reading." Well, that's like a professional athlete say, "I'm not really into training," right? Or I'm not into running. I'm a football player, but I'm not into all the running. Like, it can't be that way. If you're a seller, you have to stay current. Every pilot, every doctor, every lawyer, every profession stays current. They're reading the latest books. They're studying the case studies. They're doing all they can to avoid making the same mistakes as others. Right? So they're really trying to learn. And to me, if you're a seller, certainly if you're a leader, you can't be successful unless you're also a reader. And you can't just go through life being shallow, with a click, tick, and flick mentality on tasks.
Combo is a word that you use in sort of 3 or 4 layers of meaning. My favorite, by the way, is the fact that it's a boxing metaphor, which we're going to touch on in a sec. But combo it's a clue to the strong theme in the book. Yeah, which is that you can fuse. You can fuse things past and things future to basically come up with a combination that's deadly effective. Can you, for those who will read the book, I mean, what we want is to direct people to your writing and get them to read the book. Can you maybe just give sort of a précis about that core concept of the combination?
Yeah, well, the very first book I wrote is The Joshua Principle, Leadership Secrets of Selling. So you can see it off my shoulder here. That took 4 years to write. It's about winning the complex sale. And I really tried to write that as a beautiful book. It's written as a true story. Combo prospecting is very different. It's really the compilation of 4 years blogging. And what happened was, I've always been obsessed about how do you win the big complex enterprise sale. But what I found is most organizations and most individuals think that they're relatively okay at that. They say, "Look, I know how to sell. The real problem I've got is I just don't have enough opportunity pipeline." Now, when people say that to me, if I'm with them in the physical world, I'll smile and take a step back. So I'm out of reach. But I'll say, well, if you really knew how to sell, you would have enough pipeline. Because the notion of separating, I can progress and close a deal, from, well, but I don't really open deals, is really dangerous. I think you've spoken with Anthony Iannarino, a good friend of mine, on this podcast previously. And Anthony and I are completely aligned. Opening is really the new closing, because the way we open an opportunity is what determines whether we'll win. It's where we get to set the agenda around the commercial value of change. It's where we earn the right to gain access to other senior executives that form approval and consensus for the decision. It's where we start to set bias against our competition and for us, all in the best interest of the customer. But the way we open the deal is what starts to build trust. And if we convey the right intent, it's where we really open in a way that's all about partnership rather than us being a vendor. So our job in selling is to get the buyer to make the right comparisons. We want them comparing the cost of inaction with working with us. We don't want them comparing us with our competition. And any buyer that's in the mode of feature function comparison and price, That's not the conversation we want to have. And there was a famous American general once said that if you ever find yourself in a fair fight, you had a bad strategy. Right?
I love that.
So the truth is we want to engage early and set the agenda around where we're uniquely strong in the best interest of the customer. So what I did with Combo is everyone's saying, look, I'm okay at selling. I don't have enough opportunity pipeline. So they couldn't open. So the book is all about opening. And what we know is this: buyers, especially today, with just the proliferation of bombardment with sales engagement platforms and email automation and LinkedIn and all of the other things, is they're deadened to outreach of sellers or marketers or anyone who's a stranger. So what Combo's about is we need to pattern interrupt the way that buyers ignore sellers by adopting concurrent combinations in how we drive outreach. So as an example, we'll phone them. We need to get back on the phone, right? So we'll phone them and the phone will ring and they'll go, don't know who this is, not in my address book. I'll let that go to voicemail. And then their phone goes ding. Oh, they left a voicemail. I wonder who it was. And then the simple message is, hey, Kevin, it's Tony from Sales IQ. Looking to get 5 minutes in your calendar next week. I'll send you an email. Oh, I wonder what that's about. Or, hey, Kevin, Mary suggested you and I get together. Wondering how Wednesday is next week. I'll send you an email and a calendar invitation for 9:15 if that works. So that second example is a quad. It's 4 touches, right? It's a combination of 4 touches, all within 90 seconds. And what this does is it pattern interrupts. It's actually, it doesn't matter that they didn't answer the phone. What mattered is we woke them from their slumber. And the message you want to send to a buyer is, I'm relevant to you. I have a point of view on how you could drive improved results in your role. So it's not about me and what I sell. It's about how I think you could potentially drive improved results in your role. So that's our message. And then we go at them in multiple channels and we send the message that give me a valid no or give me some engagement, but don't ignore me. I'm not going away, right? And I'm not a pest. I'm relevant. And that's what it takes today. Most salespeople are busy today doing just enough to not feel guilty instead of doing what it actually takes to be successful.
Pattern interruption. It's a pretty profound concept. So do you see pattern interruption as part of the toolkit past the initial prospecting?
It can be. If a deal goes quiet, maybe to digress just a little, there's 4 reasons why deals slip, stall, and die in the world of B2B selling. And if a deal has really stalled, you might have to go back to pattern interrupting to sort of reignite some action, right? So Combo works all the way through. I talk about that in the book. But the 4 reasons deals slip, stall, and die. First is a lack of compelling commercial value in the eyes of the people that actually approve it. Often we'll have a champion supporter that wants what we do. They've got to take that request up the line. So a lack of commercial value. And often what happens is the person they're going to, or the committee or the board they're going to for approval, says, hey, look, we can see how this makes sense. Or, hey, I know we gave you a budget, and said to go out and come back to us, but, just having a budget doesn't mean you're approved to spend it yet. We've got 17 other projects internally, that people are wanting approved, and don't we can't do them all, right? So why this one? So if the person doesn't have a really strong answer, they need to be able to finish these 2 sentences. This is essential because, and it pays for itself by. So what we don't want is 7-minute long answers, right? They need to have cut through, and we need clarity about that. So compelling commercial value. The second reason is a lack of consensus. They come across someone maybe that's going to be providing some resources, even though they're not major to the implementation of the initiative. They go, hey, I've had people resign through COVID. I'm struggling to replace them. I don't have the bandwidth right now. Can we defer this to the new financial year? So again, we need to cover off all of the people that form consensus. The third reason is a lack of process alignment. We, or the person we're dealing with inside the customer, does not truly understand their own selection, procurement, approval, contracting processes. So we need, in essence, a mutual plan for everything that needs to happen to get this done together through to them being live. And the fourth reason is just something nasty happens. Our supporter leaves, they get acquired, they post bad results. But if we manage the first three things, we dramatically dial down the risk of time killing our deal with a nasty surprise popping up. So you may use combo, right? So, maybe we need to get to the procurement manager, or there's someone else in the consensus group, that's holding things up. So it's valid all the way through.
Nasty surprises. You interestingly spoke straight into my situation. You had a line in there where you're like, your very best prospect is going to be acquired by some company. I was like, oh, yeah, he's got a crystal ball into my moment right now.
We've all been there. We've all been there. And the thing I say to sellers and leaders and even CEOs is that if you live an existence where you feel like maybe you age a whole year of your life at the end of a quarter or at the end of a financial year, it's always because you just do not have enough pipeline coverage, against the number that you're seeking to drive. So strong quality pipeline coverage that's consistent is the key to dialing down stress and risk for anybody in their role.
You have this. I want to read you a quote because I really like it. This one's a saver. Sales is a blue collar job dressed up in Wall Street clothing.
Yeah.
That I thought was written from experience. Nobody writes a sort of a quotation like that unless they have been able to see the job from multiple sides. What did you have in mind when you were writing that?
Well, selling is brutal. And the thing I found is, if you look at the interesting thing is this: we in sales earn as much as doctors, dentists, lawyers, airline pilots. We can earn great money. A lot of us earn more money than the people in those professions, especially poor pilots, right? And yet those people will give up anywhere between 7 and 15 years of their life, either studying or being very underpaid to earn the right to practice the thing they're passionate about. There's very few universities in the world that offer a degree qualification in selling, right? There's qualifications in marketing, but marketing and selling tends to be very, very disconnected. So the reality is a lot of people get attracted into sales that aren't necessarily university or degree qualified. They come from a diverse background. They might be someone that's technically good at something and then they want to have a go at selling. Maybe they feel they've got the gift of the gab, so I sort of make the joke in the book, no one wants to deal or buy from the effusive blabbermouth. That's all about them, right? And I make some interesting analogies in the book about sex and being the hottest one at the bar and dating, right? There's all these analogies in selling, but the truth is, you need to be an engineer of process. You need to be a warrior of competitive battle. You need to be an evangelist. You need to be a counselor, right? You need to be a psychologist and a lawyer. There's all these different skills that we need to bring to the arena of selling in order to be successful. But the most important thing is that we're driven by positive values. I've always believed that selling should be about making a positive difference in the life of the customer, for that individual we're dealing with, both personally and professionally, for them in their role, de-risking their own career success and helping them be a hero in their own organization, helping them have, get back to their families earlier, giving them time back, getting promoted, but then also for the organization. So if you asked me if I could go back and talk to the 25-year-old self, and through a time machine somehow, the advice I'd give myself is, it's not all about you, Tony, right? It's not about you. It's not about you and your success. It's all about the customer and their success. If you're obsessively focused on that, and if you're disciplined and competent and have a good work ethic, everything else will take care of itself. And I think back to the era of someone like Zig Ziglar, who passed away, I think, in 2012. But Ziggy was an amazing coach and mentor in the world of selling, not just to me, but to thousands of people around the world. And he was very values driven in what he's done. And I think we need to get back to that kind of age of innocence. We live in a world today that's very narcissistic, and everyone's about their own success, crushing quota, defeating the competition, right? But it's not about, it doesn't have to be combative. It can actually be altruistic.
I was pursuing with Anthony the concept of character, why character matters, and he made a very good appeal for why it's actually essential. And I think for that reason, a number of our clients and even our own practice here, we're not against reading some of the great classics from Seneca to Francis Bacon to Aristotle, because they deal with some of these very tough problems. And I can say that there's something in combo prospecting which deals with a challenge. When people read some of those great classic writers, you read Seneca, who was a Stoic, and you're like, yeah, I get it. He's teaching me to sort of, have gravitas and, be sort of present in the moment. I wonder if he was really, really effective, like would the guy make 50 cold calls a day? Right. So that's always the lingering doubt is, okay, for these like deep thinkers, these philosophers and so on, would they really be a badass on the trading floor? How does that work? And there's something in the kernel of your book, which is you don't throw away everything that's old, everything that's past. There's a few things in past ways of doing things that are incredibly valuable, and they need immediate currency. They need to happen at 4:30 on a Wednesday. And you don't accept everything that's newfangled. And so I wanted to ask you about that. How have you gone about sort of drawing the line with, say, past techniques or wisdom and future techniques and wisdom in saying some of this we'll keep and some we won't?
Yeah. Well, we definitely need to blend old school and new school together to be effective. We've always known that you need a reasonable, not a super high level, but a reasonable level of IQ to make it. You can't be dumb and be successful. In selling, you definitely need high EQ. In any sales or leadership role, you need high emotional intelligence, EQ. But increasingly today, you also need TQ, you need technical quotient, because the TQ piece is enabling what you're seeking to drive and achieve at scale. So when I think old school, I go back to the values-driven approach to how I'm going to market, and that speaks to positive intent. People aren't fools. They can tell if someone's all about themselves and they're trying to manipulate me. I can tell whether people are doing that. So we want to convey the right intent. Hey, I'm all about you driving improved results in your role. And for you to be able to drive change in a way that delivers best value for money and lowest risk for the organization. I'm just trying to figure out whether we are the right fit for you. It's why I'm asking you these questions. Now, I wouldn't say it all that way, right? But that's the intent I'm trying to convey. And that leads with building a level of trust. People will tend to trust us if they feel that we understand them and that we have shared values. And then the other part of the formula is, do we have the right capabilities and a positive reputation? In their eyes, that's the other piece. But the understanding of them and the shared values, the values alignment piece with them is critical. And trust is really an X factor. So this is old school. This is old school content, but it's very relevant today, right? People think it's all about trust in the brand. Well, what all of the research shows, so Corporate Executive Board and Gartner have done a bunch of research. They did this as part of the Challenger Sale book. They surveyed over 5,000 buyers, and they said to them, look, when you get a short list that you're dealing with, what is it that sways you to go with the winner? And it came down to four things: price, brand, the features and functionality, the attributes of what we're buying, and the engagement experience we had with the selling organizations. Price was only 9%. Isn't that amazing? Because most sellers, if you ask them, why did we lose the deal? They'll almost universally say, hey, we lost based on price. Yeah. Price was the smallest thing. 53% was that engagement experience. So our ability to engage in a way where we actually build trust and confidence, where we start to reframe their thinking and provide some genuine insights, get them thinking about the real issues and opportunities in the initiative, where their real risks are and how they can manage those. That's how we become the emotional favorite. And a good friend of mine, Kian McLaughlin here in Australia, has also done a lot of research around win-loss reviews.
Mhm.
And his research in Asia Pacific for big software companies supports exactly those findings, and it's more recent. So at an old school level, you think, well, how do I provide insight and value for them? How do I be values driven so that I'm building trust? And then at a new school level, right, I need to be aware of all of the industry trends. I need to be engaging through the channels that are most relevant to them. I need to make sure that I'm current with everything that's going on, and I'm driving the right levels of productivity. So the new school piece, I think, is more about how you drive the right levels of productivity as opposed to how you sell.
Are you a boxer?
I've done karate.
Okay.
And obviously, when I thought about combinations, we know that in boxing, in MMA and karate and any of these things, it's all about the combination of things together that becomes the magic, right? It's the thing that'll help you win. So I know that selling shouldn't be violent. You know, it's not something we're doing to our customers, something we're doing for them. But that's why I use that analogy, and I've done a bit of karate.
Well, I am, and I thought you don't just say it's a combo. You say that it's the jab and the cross, or
That's
the jab
right.
and the
Jab, cross. That's right.
yeah. And that was quite apt, I thought, in that the fusion you're talking about between the new school, which more generally is represented by technology and scale reach and certain modes of just scale and efficiency, feel like jab, right? That like you have to stay busy, right? The jab
Yes.
gets thrown, by the way, like 10 times for
Lots.
every like power punch. I mean, unless you're sort
Correct.
of what they call like in the phone booth, the jab is the tool, by the way, that they call the can opener. So it's that's what you use to detect timing. That's what you use to determine pace. That's what you use to
testing.
to sort of gauge range. And I thought the metaphor really worked, particularly not just when it's like, well, one hand's the left and one hand's the right, but when you think about it as jab and then cross. And a cross is something that you must save up. It takes exceptional, it takes more energy. It puts you further off balance. Potentially, you have to time it. You have to sort of wait for the situation. So I thought the metaphor really worked. And I will be sharing it with our community, who, by the way, Tony, tend to be Southeast Asia primarily, but of course they reach into Australia and North Asia as well, and a little bit into North America. So I keep that metaphor, keep using it, because to the extent that you're dealing with people who have their martial arts training, I think that really lands home as a framework for how those two things are supposed to go together.
Yeah, and for all of those in Southeast Asian countries that are watching this and listening to this, I did the sales kickoff yesterday for a big global software company, about 250 people, included Japan, India, and all through Asia, as well as Australia, New Zealand. And I was talking about combo prospecting. It was a keynote and a half-day workshop. And I said to them, I absolutely acknowledge that aggressive bull in the China shop American selling tactics don't work in many Asian markets. That's why the Challenger sale has done so much damage to sellers up in Asian markets. So in places like Japan and GRC and maybe South Korea, very relationship driven. But here's the challenge for you if you're in those markets. If you buy into the lie that the only path into a new prospective customer is through an introduction, and you're waiting to be introduced, you cannot be successful. You can't be successful with that. So yes, we need to honor cultural business etiquette in our own market and be true to our own values. But we also have to find a way to be successful. We need to find a way to break into the world of those people that need our help. So we need to become more proactive in how we secure a common relationship introduction. We need to find ways to do this without losing control. So if we're waiting to be introduced, we're not being proactive. So the principles of combo, which are really around pattern interrupting the way that buyers ignore sellers or people they don't know. I've got a pattern interrupt. You just need to figure out what are the engagement channels that the person I'm trying to reach lives in. It could be WeChat, WhatsApp, text messages are good. Maybe it's LinkedIn. Email's traditionally good. We need to get back on the phone and just find a way to still go build the pipeline you need and go beyond this thing of passively waiting for an introduction from a partner or somebody else.
You talk about some other things too, which I think are maybe maybe in a more elite class, but in the book, you sort of say, hey, look, you just do them, right? Don't sit on the sideline and say it's too expensive or the company didn't pay for it. But you talk about dinners with the right kinds of people, maybe tickets to the right kinds of events, making sure that you're present in the physical locations where these people might be. Yeah, maybe just a couple of words more about that, because I think I've lived in Asia, one place or another, Delhi, Hong Kong, Singapore, for nearly 20 years. And each of these places are very relationship driven and so forth.
Yeah.
But that can't be a reason to wait on the sidelines for a referral. And even if you don't feel like making a call, or maybe that's not appropriate, you have some other ideas that I think have a lot of merit.
Yeah, and in a world where it's increasingly difficult to get on site with someone and meet them physically because of what's happened with COVID for 2 years. And by the way, I personally believe that the world will never fully return to how things were. I think we're in a digital first world now forever. And I think buyers have thought, wow, this is actually pretty good. I've got a lot of my time back. I'm only going to be in the office 3 days a week now. I don't need professional visitors from sales land, coming and buying me coffee and taking my time anymore. So there'd better be some value in the meeting. Otherwise, I'm not taking it, right? Is the way buyers ask. We all need to up our game. But on the other side of this, it's now never been easy for us to get into the very home of the people we're trying to sell to, because they're working from home. They're using Zoom or some other tool. And we're in their house. We're seeing their kids walk past, their cat walk across the frame of the camera. We can build in many ways a deeper level of connection if we're good at what we do. So learning how to use the tech well and learning how to drive engagement, even though we're doing it digitally, is a whole nother skill set. So I don't know whether that really answers the question, but the other piece of this is don't buy into the lie that, LinkedIn is not a big thing in my market. There's 800 million members of LinkedIn. 2 people join a second. Even in countries like China, there's millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of LinkedIn members. In markets like China, they're wanting to sell into the West, right? So they're thinking, well, I got to go be where my market is. Well, they're in LinkedIn. So you can build out your network in LinkedIn. So every single day, we should be thinking about how am I building out the size and the quality of my network? And then how am I using a tool like LinkedIn Sales Navigator to find those common relationships and common threads, do research well to make sure that my outreach is contextualized without trying to boil the ocean in the level of research we do. Because we don't have the luxury of 3 hours of research to then go make a call or send an email.
Do you see things that are sort of fresh frontiers? So LinkedIn Navigator is not, it's surprising to think like, how old LinkedIn is now, because it still feels quite fresh and quite new, but it's somewhat established. Do you see sort of a new vintage of other tools that are like it coming up?
Well, nothing like LinkedIn Sales Navigator. So we're talking about combo, but my latest book, TechPad Sales, talks about how you can take the principles in combo and implement them effectively. So it gives you example scripts. It shows you how to build cadences and sequences. There's a new category of technology called Sales Engagement Platform, SEP. So it's things like Outreach.io or SalesLoft. So the whole idea is, it's like the old mail merging. You can get a list of target companies and prospects, and you can identify personalization traits and try and drive effective email at scale. The mistake most people make is they load into their Gatling gun of automation spam. And what they do is they burn through their list really quickly, and they damage their brand and maybe even get their domain blocked. So again, you got to go back to old school and think, I need to do this intelligently, not just, use a tool clumsily and actually damage the chances of my own success. So there is no other LinkedIn really, but there's lots of sales intelligence tools, things that can monitor, for example, for trigger events. So there's a good company here in Australia called trigger.ai, trigger without the E.ai. And if you understand your ideal customer profile and the buyer personas you sell to, and then you identify those attributes at a technographic, psychographic and firmographic level, and you can load that into the platform, and it'll go and find lookalike organizations, gives you a list of organizations. And then you think, okay, what are the attributes of those organizations that create a propensity for me to get some traction? Because the interesting thing is this: at any given point in time, 3% of the market is actively looking for what it is that we do.
Right.
But 40% of the market is open. They're open to change if we can find a way to position the benefit of change effectively. So these platforms like Trigger can help you find the 40%, rather than the red ocean shark feeding frenzy, right? So if you're using something like bombarded to monitor for buyer intent, fine, but like every other vendor's getting this as well. It's just a shark feeding frenzy of competition.
Yeah.
But strategic selling is getting earlier. So platforms like Trigger that identify the things that go on. So you might think, well, any company that's hiring, a chief marketing officer and these other attributes are in play, a new senior person into a role is hired to affect change. These other attributes indicate growth and investment, right? That's who I should talk to, right? So you're going to get much better results.
So Tony, you're right now, as far as I can tell, and maybe just kind of clarify this if I'm getting a detail wrong. You've got 2 irons in the fire officially: RSVP selling, which is a proprietary limited. So
yep.
And
Sales
IQ Global. Yep. Is that right? Are there some other things you're doing as well?
I'm on the advisory board of Trigger, the company that I just talked about. So
yep.
So it's really RSVP selling is my consulting company for me doing consulting, speaking, and Sales IQ Global is where I'm putting my IP into an e-learning platform so people can go and learn at scale around the concept. So we've got a create pipeline program in Sales IQ, and it's all of the combo prospecting principles. So it helps someone know everything, but then do everything they need to do to self-generate pipe.
So who's the ideal persona for you?
For me, okay. So the CEO or the head of sales in a software or technology or professional services company. So that's my ICP. And if someone says, "Hey Tony, what do you do?" The answer is, "Hey Kevin, I work with heads of sales and CEOs in your industry to help them get more of their people on target year to date and to de-risk the forecast that's going up to the board." And if you say, "Well, how would you do that?" I'd say, "Well, it's about you being able to hold all of your sellers to account for self-generating the pipeline that's needed to bridge the gap." Right. So it's sales leaders in the tech sector. On average, 40 to 70% of salespeople in the SaaS industry are not making their number. And the failure,
right?
Yes, and the failure rates are climbing.
So let me ask you a question about that. Do you think the number is fair? And they're failing, or does that say something else about the number?
Well, if we rewind history a little bit in the software industry, the software industry has had to make a really tricky transition. They had historically a crack cocaine addiction to big enterprise license sales that funded expensive sellers and a very expensive sales process. And often the customer would never fully deploy the software they bought.
Right.
So we've now transitioned to an as a service model for software, where the client can start smaller and it's a shared risk model. So the customer is not really profitable for the seller until they start deploying to volume over time. So it's definitely shared risk. And interestingly, that model has not improved the success rates of software implementations really, because one of the things that causes failure of a software implementation is a lack of commitment to what they're doing. So if you start small and we'll have a play and we'll do a pilot and we'll get a little group on and we'll see, often that in of itself, the signals a lack of commitment actually drives failure. So, but the problem for the industry is these initial transactions when you win a customer, and I know that the lifetime value of the customer is huge. I definitely accept that. But the initial transactions, trying to fund the cost of sale at the initial transaction is really tricky. So they've done lots of things with comp plans to try and resolve this, but to get senior capable sellers to earn the big bucks they used to in these models where there's much smaller transaction sizes and there's still long sales cycles has been really difficult. So they've typically got smaller quotas, but the average transaction sizes are smaller as well. It's a real challenge for them. And what a lot of organizations have done is they've tried to industrialize the sales process by stratifying roles and industrializing it by saying, well, let's get some lower cost people to just do the outbound and set the meeting, right? So this thing of the ISR, BDR, SDR, whatever DR de jour that people like to use, right? But the junior outbound person, and some companies will even segment that role to inbound people and outbound people, SDRs and BDRs, for example. And other organizations get a third stratification, right? They get someone that's just doing the data, to build the lists and do all the research. But the problem is this: if you're a junior person, your ability to carry the conversation into the C-suite is actually really tricky. So that's why the account executive, the field AE, the account executive needs to work with the inside sales function to decide who's going to call who in the account. And the AE is the one that needs to be calling into the C-suite because you have to be able to carry the conversation. Anyway, but the point is the failure rates in the software industry are high and they're trending worse. And I predict in tech-powered sales, it's a bold prediction. I co-authored the book, by the way, with Justin Michael. So we co-authored it together, but we predict that 1/3 of field salespeople in the tech sector will disappear this decade, right? And the money that was being paid for expensive Sir Lunch-a-Lot professional visitor field salespeople, being facetious, obviously, but that money will be applied to more and more tech stacks for better qualified, better executing, slightly more senior inside sellers. And the closing, right? So a lot of the selling will be inside, and then the field will be people with strong technical expertise. And the closing will often be management, are out there closing the deals, rather than a rep.
Well, a lot of the vast majority of our client base are a segment of yours, which is professional services.
Yeah.
Inside professional services, depending on which division, if you account law in there, classic consulting, niche and specialty consulting, such as, specialists in government, specialists in technology, and so on. They close with their senior most people. The organizations I just described don't have any division called sales. They don't have any division called business development, other than sometimes in law firms, they have what they call BD, which is really what everybody else calls marketing. So it's a bit funny.
It's true.
But they have something which is very dear to me, which I think may form some of the answer. And I heard it in your words. I'd like to share it with you and get your impression about it, because you've been in the field so long. So they have apprenticeship. And they don't call it that. Apprenticeship is sort of an old school word that now only seems to belong to, plumbing and electrical, and sort of journeyman craft. But in earlier days, in any given guild or craft, you'd sort of give 4 to 7 years under a master craftsman. And during that time, you weren't learning just, how do I sharpen the knives, and now how do I shape the wood, and now how do I put the thing out? You learned everything about what it meant to be the master craftsman. How do you organize for a day? How do you divide work and home? How do
Yeah.
you talk to the customers? How do you fire a customer? All kinds of things you're learning because you're in the milieu. You're immersed in the milieu. And I think there's something happening in our craft, which is sales, which is people are being given something like a SDR job. And there's an implied matriculation that they're going to eventually maybe make it up, but it isn't treated as a true apprenticeship where it's like, look, I'm going to show
Correct.
you why. Okay, I give you a checklist of qualification. You need to determine whether or not these people have budget. So they ask horrible, clumsy questions like, do you have budget? Which inoculates anybody from wanting to have further conversation.
Because it gives us commission breath. Exactly.
Yeah, right. And I just wonder if maybe something of an apprenticeship, I'm using it metaphorically, of an apprenticeship actually gives those folks the chance to say, look, you must actually ask about budget. You have to, that's correct. But I'm going to show you how to use your tools. I'm going to show you in our craft the art of how a question is asked, of how a meeting is opened, of how we, gracefully depart from a prospect that's not a good prospect, and so forth. What do you think of apprenticeship and its potential?
I think apprenticeship is essential. The level to which organizations have been investing in sales training in the last 20 years has been appalling. And the bandwidth, the time available for sales managers to do the coaching and mentoring, right, as if in an apprenticeship, has all been squeezed out. So most sales managers have got broader spans of control, insane requirements from above around forecasting and reporting and all of these hygiene things inside a business. When I first got into sales, my sales manager had 5 people in his team, and every day he went out with one of the 5. So I had him in the car with me for a whole day, and we go do calls together, and he was brilliant, right? He would bite his tongue and let me screw up, which is really smart because it might have cost a deal, but he helped me learn from that situation, because we're all best convinced for reasons that we ourselves discover. Just being told something doesn't mean it'll affect change or it will stick. And that's, the thing in combo, the story I tell about my beginning in sales and that horrendous period of my life. The reason I really shared that is I started out in sales needing insane levels of resilience. And I think that's lacking in a lot of sellers today. We've always needed to be really resilient. It's a rejection-laden, tough environment. And just when you think you've finally conquered it, it's a new quarter or a new month or a new financial year. And the reward for everything that you did is a much bigger number again. So I agree with you. The average tenure of an inside sales rep is about 13, 14 months. It takes about 9 months to ramp one of them to actually be productive. Right. So when you go, wow, it takes 9 months to ramp anybody to be productive, and their average tenure is 13 or 14 months, being the manager of the people in those roles. And I do a lot of work in this area, by the way. It's probably my biggest market I serve, helping SDRs be successful. And they're always turning over. They're losing half of the team every year, 50, 60% turnover rates. So a lot of people get into that SDR role. Maybe they aspire to be an account exec, but sometimes they think, you know what, sales isn't for me, because they realize how tough it is.
Well, I want to stay to our commitment on your time, because if we only talking about one book, and if we spoke about all 3 and you give us the time, we'll go for another 2 hours. But Tony, we could have a chat again another day. I'd like to leave people with a clear direction on how to engage you depending on who they are. Can you just sort of give a quick rundown on how people can best find you, read your stuff, get in touch with you if they want to for different reasons?
Yeah, so obviously you can connect with me in LinkedIn. So just look for Tony J. Hughes in LinkedIn. My website is tonyhughes.com.au. If you're looking for e-learning and sales enablement around these principles, go to salesiqglobal.com. And I'd certainly welcome the opportunity to talk to you about keynoting at a sales conference or something like that. I've got a full book of clients I work with. I'm really kind of maxed out, which is why I'm trying to get my IP into Sales IQ. But I've really loved the conversation. Just remember, if you can be successful in selling, you can make a positive difference in the lives of others. And unless someone is successful at selling in your own organization, then nobody else actually has a role. You know, there is no professional services or people in accounting and HR that are needed. So it's so important that we succeed. And what we do as sellers is more than 50% of why the customer selects us, right? So despite brand and the features and functions and the wonderful product that we sell and everything else, it's the way we engage the market that really makes the difference. And everyone needs to lift their game in a digital first world where it's harder to drive engagement.